Hi, and welcome to Unit 2 of Managing Your Microbiome for Optimal Health and Nutrition. I'm Dr. Mary Lucero. Now, it's only fair that you know what training and experience I bring to the table before you consider my approach to managing your microbiome. In this section, I will share both the personal and professional experiences that shape my personal understanding of how microbiomes function. And lest you mistake me for a medical doctor, I just want to put out there that the content I'm going to share is not intended to replace the advice of any medical professional. We do not diagnose, prevent, treat, or cure disease. Let's start with where I came from. I was born in northwestern New Mexico in an area known for its big blue skies and its wide open spaces. I didn't get to go home from the hospital right away because the day I was born I developed pneumonia. I was treated with antibiotics, and eventually I was sent home, only to return 5 more times with 5 more cases of pneumonia before my very first birthday. In fact, my parents were practicing Catholics, and at one point in this cycle of repeat pneumonia episodes, they even requested a priest to administer my last rites. Fortunately, my fever fell. The call to the priest was canceled, and to date, I remain among the living. In the years that followed, I grew up in most ways like other kids of my generation. The outdoors was in my DNA, but while I loved being outdoors, I could never keep up with other outdoor enthusiasts. I learned to enjoy the natural world largely alone. My family moved around a lot. By the time I was a teenager, I had lived in Washington, D.C., Austin, Texas, San Diego, California, Alpine, California, and 4 different towns in New Mexico. This constant migration was disruptive to family life, but it also taught me to adapt and to see the world from broad perspectives. However, and quite likely due to my experience as an infant, I got sick a lot. I grew up with quite a few symptoms and sensitivities that interfered with day-to-day living. My siblings considered me a hypochondriac and resented my constant illness. I could never keep up with them, and our constant moving made other lasting friendships difficult to create and maintain. So I found books and read a lot. By high school, my mother had put her foot down to all the moving. She bought a home in a small town, owned a restaurant, and allowed me to be the first of my siblings to attend the same high school for all 4 years. Since I was much too wheezy to play sports, I joined FFA and discovered I really liked agriculture. All my reading must have paid off somehow, because despite all the moving, high absentee rates, and working at the restaurant almost every minute that I wasn't in school, I still graduated in the top 1% of my high school class and earned a free ride to college. I was a little undecided about what to major in, so when I learned I could not only take the chemistry and biology classes I enjoyed, but also take a lot of ag classes by majoring in agricultural education, that's exactly what I did. As an undergraduate, I was forced to drop out of college one semester because of illness, but I made up the missed credits and graduated on time, once again in the top % of my class. In college, I earned spending money by working in various research laboratories in the College of Agriculture, and saved on medical expenses by learning various alternative approaches to self-care. I devoured books on herbs, diets, nutrition, acupuncture, and just about any new approach to health that was available. I graduated in 1986 with 0 farming experience and a bachelor's degree in agricultural and extension education, right in the middle of the infamous farm crisis. Jobs in agriculture were scarce for everybody, and as a sickly woman with no farm experience, I was not the most competitive candidate. So I settled for teaching secondary biology and earth science long enough to realize that I liked doing science much better than I liked teaching students who were only there because school was mandatory. I returned to the university to pursue biotechnology research that could combine my love of agricultural and environmental sciences with a career that allowed some exposure to the great outdoors, For some reason, I was always drawn to the outdoors, and some upward mobility, but also allowed some accommodation of my chronic health issues. It's worth noting that throughout this time, even though I was chronically sick, I was never diagnosed with any condition that could truly explain the symptoms I was experiencing. So I returned to New Mexico State University, and I entered the molecular biology program, where I developed an interdisciplinary program of study that combined genetic, biochemical, and molecular techniques with environmental toxicology. My thesis research involved analysis of biochemical transformation pathways used by live plants to transform environmental wastes. Because conventional wisdom at the time was that environmental wastes were best remediated by microbes, but new ideas were indicating that plants are critical for supporting those microbes in the soil, my studies focused on exploring the plant-microbe interface, and this work guided me into the fascinating world of microbiology long before the general public was discussing microbiomes. Now, on the personal front, I was married and 27 weeks pregnant the week I defended my dissertation. I had anticipated having several weeks of freedom after my defense in which to prepare for my son's arrival, but the little guy didn't want to wait that long. I defended my dissertation on a Thursday, and my son arrived 3 days later. James weighed 3 pounds, 1 ounce, and spent 6 weeks in a special care unit before I could bring him home. I spent those weeks with him reading his medical charts and learning from his doctors. Now, during those years I'd spent in graduate school, I had often thought I might have been better off choosing medical school. For the same amount of work, I would have potential to earn a whole lot more money. But those weeks in special care convinced me that my PhD was a much better choice for 3 reasons. First of all, I'm kind of an independent thinker. Growing up like I did, I had to be. But what I observed in the special care unit was that the doctors caring for my son had no autonomy at all. Nearly every decision they made was guided less by their own good judgment and less by what the patient needed, and more by hospital policy and what the insurance companies might allow. In fact, I got more practical information about caring for my son by visiting with the nurses after hours than I ever got from his doctors. Second, it took only a few rounds of questions posed to my son's doctors before I realized something quite frightening. With my minor in toxicology and my research in bioremediation, I knew more about the metabolic pathways that helped his medications break down in his tiny liver than many of the doctors I spoke with knew. I discovered there's a subtle but important difference between the pharmacology that doctors study, which teaches them how chemicals we call drugs benefit patients, and the toxicology I had studied, which shows how poisonous substances enter living systems, become metabolized, and cause harm. The physician's knowledge seemed biased toward the benefits and somewhat blind to the potential hazards of the prescriptions they were offering. Third, being in the hospital for as long as I was opened my eyes to the incredibly long hours that doctors and nurses work. I knew my own health would never be up to that, but I also began to question the logic of putting our most vulnerable population, our sick, in the hands of people who are so tired that their thinking may become compromised. Now, my son's reactions to his first immunizations were horrific. He literally screamed for days at a time. He would double over in pain. And any mom who's had to confront a screaming baby for more than 20 consecutive hours at a time is going to resolve to find a better way to treat our loved ones. I made the decision when he was young to use more natural approaches in the future. My career helped. I managed to secure postdoctoral positions in phytochemical analysis and spent years investigating potentially medicinal properties of common foods and native plants. I'm happy to say that despite his rough entry into the world, my son today is much stronger and much healthier than I have ever been. But my experiences with the healthcare system did not end with my son. After 3 different medical doctors assured me there was no reason to believe that a second pregnancy would have considerable risk, my husband and I decided to have another child. 23 weeks into my second pregnancy, I went into labor. The doctors succeeded in halting labor with drugs that they assured me were safe, but I began preterm labor 6 more times before my daughter was delivered by C-section at 34 weeks. My daughter was reasonably strong from birth forward, although she did suffer severe childhood allergies and digestive issues. Today, we know that these kinds of problems are common in C-section babies because when a baby does not pass through the mother's birth canal, she's not inoculated with those beneficial microbes that aid digestion and lend support to the immune system. I, however, did not fare as well as my daughter. The combined effects of preterm labor drugs, extended bed rest, and a C-section triggered a cascade of steadily declining health that continued for the next decade and eventually terminated my research career. The same year my daughter was born, I went to work for the USDA Jornada experimental range. There I spent 13 years exploring microbial interactions in rangeland ecosystems. This work led me to the belief that microbial interactions are associated with all plant cells and are critical for plant establishment and survival. As I studied these microbial interactions, I would also read the research available exploring microbial interactions in animals and in humans. What we were observing in our studies is that every time we introduced beneficial microbes into plant systems, we observed phenomenal plant growth and plant resilience. I began wondering how my own resistance and resilience and general health might improve if only I could find the right microbes to inoculate myself with. I was taking probiotics long before they were mainstream, but I was also skeptical that the products on the market were ideal. I knew that only 2% of the microbes in any environment can be successfully isolated, cultured, and made into marketable products. So, what about the other 98%? What are we not getting that our microbiomes need? Now, using techniques like DNA sequence analysis, multiple sequence alignments, phylogenetics, and combinations of microscopic imaging and micropropagation, we were able to identify numerous important microbial associations with plants that had never been previously described. We showed that microbes living inside plant cells influence such important aspects of plant health and nutrition that even in so-called aseptic cultures, plants without microbes simply cannot survive. We were among the first scientists to discuss plants in terms of their microbiome. While we applied some of our findings to arid land remediation problems, like how to restore native grasses on oil and natural gas well pads, we found that plants inoculated with native End-O-Fite microbes established more quickly and produced more seeds and stolons. We could not help but recognize that the technologies we're developing had value in croplands as well. My colleague, now the late Dr. Jerry Barrow, who had first captured my interest in fungal endophytes, had always predicted that our work would form the basis for a new agricultural revolution. In 2012, we presented a model by which plant-associated microbes could be used to reverse climate change while increasing agricultural productivity. Now, Jerry and I were both pretty excited about this synthesis of information because we thought it offered some powerful solutions to global-scale problems. So we were stunned when the agency we worked for told us they would no longer support our research simply because it held no benefit for the agrochemical companies. Despite the agreement among 10 co-authors representing federal agencies and universities in 3 countries, It was more than 2 years before our work even made it to publication. This turn of events triggered a suite of problems for me personally and professionally, because it was forcing me to entertain prospects for a career change at a time when my health was hitting the breaking point. Meanwhile, my kids were approaching high school age, and having relocated so many times in my own childhood, I just wasn't willing to subject them to the instability that would create. Unfortunately, I was about to discover that relocating was not even an option. By the time my agency had pulled my support, I was suffering from chronic pain so intense that I was only sleeping 1 or maybe 2 hours each night. After a month of this, fatigue had clouded my thinking so badly that I was really having trouble organizing research data, and I had exhausted nearly all the options conventional and alternative medicine had to offer. I was actually told by my medical doctor that I had to retire. She believed my job was killing me. Deep inside, I knew she was probably right. As I pondered my bleak options one day, I was staring at the image we had prepared for our manuscript, and I was hit on the head with my personal version of a Newton's apple. It was an aha moment that would not only reverse my declining health, but also offer insights for billions worldwide who had suffered with chronic disease. You see, in this picture, on the left, we depict a plant with a healthy microbiome. This plant is nutritionally self-sufficient and resistant to stresses that can contribute to disease. The soil has good properties, and air, water, and nutrients move freely. But when you eliminate those microbes or transform them to an imbalanced state, your plant becomes nutrient deficient, prone to pests and disease. All the nutrients and biochemicals get eroded away, and you end up with the kind of crops on that plant that represent what we are currently putting in our supermarkets. For years, I'd been struggling to eat right, exercise, and do good things for my health, but I had been eating foods that were grown on depleted soils and processed in ways that eliminate not only harmful but also beneficial microbes. Add to that my long history with the healthcare system, a history that included dozens of antibiotic treatments and treatments with other pharmaceuticals that can alter the structure of naturally occurring microbial communities, and suddenly it became obvious to me that the best way to restore my health would be to treat myself in the same way that I would manage any other degraded landscape. I simply had to apply universal principles of biorestoration. Like an arid grassland, my personal health could be restored if only I replaced and supported the natural microbial communities that allow all living systems to thrive. I began implementing the lifestyle changes I'll be describing throughout this course, and little by little, I began to recover. I did this without drugs, without invasive medical procedures, and without medical expenses. In the years that followed my exit from institutionalized research, scientists and medical professionals worldwide have confirmed many of the insights I based my recovery on. In 2008, the U.S. National Institute of Health launched the Human Microbiome Project, and by this month, by November of 2017, I was able to search and identify 33,600 peer-reviewed studies on the human microbiome. It has since been demonstrated that gut health, skin health, brain health, and more are all tightly associated with healthy and diverse natural microbiomes. It's been shown that conditions I've been plagued with my whole life, like sugar cravings, weight gain, asthma, and allergies, can all be explained by the repeat antibiotic treatments I received in and beyond infancy. Antibiotics cause dysbiosis. It's been shown in recent years that my daughter's C-section probably contributed to her childhood allergies and food sensitivities, as well as to my own postpartum failure to thrive. And it's been shown that microbiome restoration offers remarkable promise for reversing the plague of chronic disease that's crippling our healthcare system and reducing workforce productivity and quality of life for millions. Since applying basic restoration protocols to my personal health, my chronic pain and fatigue have diminished, my asthma and allergies have largely disappeared, my dental health has improved, my skin has cleared up, and my healthcare costs have dropped to a fraction of what they were 5 years ago. My total quality of life has improved dramatically. So, what makes me qualified to teach about microbiomes? Well, on paper, you can say that I have a PhD in molecular life sciences, complete with training in microbiology, cellular toxicology, and nutrition. I have 20 plus years of graduate, postdoctoral, and professional research examining microbial interactions in complex living systems. I've published research describing the use of microbes to enhance living systems, and I have a lifetime of personal experience with the effects of a damaged microbiome. I've also demonstrated success in restoring complex living systems, including my own. So, in short, while medical doctors have studied pathology and know how to treat disease, and I am certainly not a medical doctor, I have studied ways to restore toxic environments and disturbed living systems. I know what your cells and your microbiome need to survive and thrive. I've studied those factors that can enhance or diminish the way living cells function, and as a survivor of a lifetime of dysbiosis being the imbalance of a microbiome, I also understand the consequences of allowing your microbiome to malfunction at a very personal level. Furthermore, I'm enjoying the rewards right now that can be experienced as a microbiome is restored. So to keep the doctors happy and the FDA happy, I'm going to repeat one more time that the content presented in this course is not intended to replace the advice of any medical professional. I certainly do not, and my organization does not attempt to diagnose, prevent, treat, or cure disease. So if you'll look below, there's details on how to sign up for the Managing Your Microbiome course. Hope to see you on the other side.